You're listening to Synchronic Saturdays with ENFJ Meghan and ENFP Crystal. In this podcast, Crystal and I discuss the 16 type patterns and the intricacies of their cognitive processes. We use Carl Jung's theory of psychological types as a tool to observe individuals and society at large. With this tool, we can better understand human nature and resolve conflict more effectively. We seek to create a world in which knowledge of cognitive functions can eliminate misunderstandings and spur humans to live with integrity. And now, let's get on to the episode.
Hello, welcome to Synchronic Saturdays with Meghan and Crystal. How is it going today, Crystal?
It's going okay, as always.
God damn it, I asked you that again.
I remember, because it's like, oh, when she responds with that, that means I asked the wrong question. Has to be, it's so good to have you here, Crystal, as if we are two announcers on a freaking telecast.
Well, I guess I just
it's good to be here too, Meghan LeVota.
Every time I greet the audience, it's like I feel this, how is it going, Crystal? I just sincerely want to know once we hit record.
You know what? It is actually going pretty well. Not that I have time to get into why that is, which is why I feel awkward just saying that and expecting people to believe me. But you'll just take my word for it.
Today we're talking about ESFJs, and funny enough.
Oh my gosh, wait. An ESFJ would definitely ask me how it's going and not change that like willfully, but you attempt to. So it's real funny that we're actually
the ESFJs watching also want to know how it's going. But I was just gonna say, it's funny, we are talking about ESFJs today, and Crystal was just embracing her SI and was just showing me all these different eyeshadow colors that she was getting.
Okay, well, for those who are listening, I'm holding up a red It's funny because Meghan's Effie did not invite me necessarily to literally do the same as I just did to her, but I am holding up a red ColourPop makeup palette, and I'm also holding up a Purple Rita palette, and I just love makeup now. Not sponsored, unfortunately. But yeah, so Meghan is correct. She is not exaggerating. I really was embracing my SI.
Yeah, and also please,
look how pretty they are.
Do not be confused. Me and Crystal are not a member of the beauty community on YouTube, so there's no drama here. We're not exposing anyone in this video. This is not
just exposing how good the Supernova BH Cosmetics palette, even though it's 3 years old now, goes in. Yeah, it's really interesting because I started getting into makeup around the time that the beauty community was exploding. So like tangent, and I'll get back to the point. But it was exploding, and I had just been watching these gurus just, put stuff on their eyes, and I was like, wow, they're so good at blending. I'm so glad there's people like this on this earth who are here to teach me makeup. And then all this drama explodes, and like their top video is now like some kind of weird takedown, and I'm like, I guess I got into you at the wrong time, because apparently now you're canceled. And I'm like, oh well, is your makeup technique canceled though? And I'm just like, oh man, like it's like I just always go right before the flames start flaming, and I'm like, ugh, okay, well,
speaking of, we've talked about makeup, talked about drama, we're talking about ESFJs today. And also another thing, you might notice my background is different.
If you're watching this video,
if you're watching this video, you can see that my background is different. If you're not, maybe you're new to my channel and you just don't know. I recently moved, which has been an exciting thing. I moved in with my partner. I've never lived with a significant other before, so this is like a huge step for me.
It's also been a second since you've had a roommate other than yourself, right?
True, yeah.
There's a lot of change going on.
Yeah, so a lot of change. And it's funny because my partner has an ESFJ mom. I have an ESFJ mom. And something we were actually talking about recently is how ESFJ moms just know everything about us. And like,
they don't forget a thing.
Well, yeah, and we'll go into this later in the episode, but this is just random. But I remember after we moved, my girlfriend was staring off into space, and then
it sounds like her.
And I was like, "Oh, you're probably just tired." She was like, "That seems like something my mom would say." And then she just was like, we were talking about how ESFJ moms, they always know whenever like you're in like a weird mood, or you're like, I'm in a weird mood, or like, I just don't know like why I haven't eaten. They always just get you with the, oh, you're probably just tired, honey. You just moved. Or like, oh,
The honey, they hit you with the
like,
honey.
gosh. And it's like, I feel like you guys, if you are an ESFJ listening, you didn't know I'm an ENFJ, I want you to know, I just so don't know how to plan for how overwhelming moving is. I just always am like, oh yeah, sure,
you
this
just so
happened.
don't know how to plan for how overwhelming life is and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, in general. And so I just like overcommit myself. And so yeah, we haven't had a video or we haven't had a podcast episode in a couple weeks now. But we're back. I'm adjusting to the sensing part of life, which is something that, I wish I had an ESFJ here helping me with this. My mom, though, as an ESFJ, she came over to help me, or after I like moved things in, and she mentioned something of like, when you were younger, you always would get so confused and overwhelmed and not know where to put things when you were packing and unpacking. And I just felt really bad for you. And I just felt like I had to step in and calm you down, because you would get really anxious. And I was like, what did I? Because all I remember is my mom kind of barging in there and being like, this is your junk drawer. This is for all the things that you don't know where it goes. Just put it in there for now, and that'll keep you going. Like, she just like says things like that. But anyway, this is enough of a tangent. One last thing I'll say is that Crystal and I offer typing services, which you can find linked below. And soon, within a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I'll let you guys know. Crystal and I are going to be sort of reorganizing the way we do our typing services, where we will have sort of a calendar thing so that you can get your exact ETA for when it will be done. You don't have to wait on me to email you, because there's just been this whole thing where people email me, or like people fill out the form and then I have to email them and then wait for a payment. It's going to be like a lot more simple of a process, to where you will know exactly how long it takes so you get your typing, your type report. And also Crystal and I it'll just be a lot more simple for us. We'll be able to type like more people. So
yeah, and also we are also unveiling another aspect of this, right, Meghan?
Yes, there's a lot in the works that you guys will be the first to know about. Crystal and I are also working on a course that we're doing together that you'll know about soon. And one last just change and update is that I made an update to my membership group, which you can find below, where right now it is just like, it's $12 a month for a monthly discussion, where each month we're going to talk about just any sort of random topic and then discuss our types. So I think that's going to happen. The next one's going to happen July 18th. So be on the lookout for that as well. Is there anything you want to add or share?
I think I'm good for now. Yeah.
Cool.
And speaking of typing someone, it's funny because we just typed someone that we promised we would record the ESFJ for. So now I have motivation to want to do the ESFJ.
Exactly. I do too. Like, yeah, we recently typed an ESFJ. Shout out if you're watching. But like, since I just sent out that report, I'm just like, yay, now I'm excited to talk about ESFJs.
Yeah, because, and I want to go into that actually, because
yeah, go for it.
Truth be told, there are not enough ESFJs, or okay, not even just ESFJs. There's not that many sensors that like are openly like talking and kind of in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I just haven't met that many specifically ESFJs in the community. Even though my sister is an ESFJ, and I can recall like two other ESFJs in my life, it's like probably the least represented demographic of just people I've encountered just in my very short life. And so it's kind of like, it's interesting to try to unpack this type for me because, you know, having like SFJs be this mom archetype versus seeing them in the wild as, you know, a young millennial, it's completely different. Like, you don't, when you're like 20s and you don't have kids yet, you don't act like necessarily a mom. You might kind of be a mom friend, but you're not necessarily going to look like a stereotype of like a fussy mom. And I think sometimes a lack of representation for me makes me accidentally project that. So when I found out my sister, one of the people closest to me in my life, was an ESFJ, that was when I got more curious about ESFJs in general, because she is not a mom friend by any means. So then I was like, oh no, this reinvigorates my whole understanding of functions, and that's when I really was departing from stereotypes. So I'm super excited to like jump in because we just don't have enough. I have so much to say about that because there just haven't been enough ESFJs just personally in my life. So I don't know, you can leave your comment too, Meg.
Yeah, and I also, my sister is an ESFJ.
We both have ESFJ sisters.
I feel like I've made this video before about like millennial SJs, but about millennial SJs being more accepting of change and perhaps even more intuitive seeming, because it's really difficult for an SJ in the 21st century to just have no NE whatsoever, because you have Google right there. You can find
seriously,
anything
everywhere. You have memes. You know too much from the internet, from YouTube, from everything.
The stereotype of like an SJ farmer who never left their small town and can't consider the other possibilities of other towns and other cultures. That just isn't a thing. Like, it's sure like SJs are still gonna cling to their comfort zone and their experience, but like especially ESJs, I feel like it's not that they have better NE than they did before, but they have more outlets for that NE. So
yeah, they have so many outlets. My sister is like fun. I'm not gonna promote her TikTok because that's weird, but she is very active on TikTok. Megan knows what I'm talking about because every time she has a new TikTok, I unsolicitedly just show it to Megan, and she's like, "Oh," because we kind of look alike. So people are like, "Oh, like I show all my friends actually, especially because I have a lot of ENFJ friends, and they're like, "Oh, she like looks like you, but with like a bitchier expression." Because
whenever I see pictures of you guys as a little kid, where one is not with the other, I don't know who's who because I don't.
Yeah, and it's funny because we're 5 years apart, but because I'm like pretty like short for I'm a short woman, and she's about my height now, so we look like twins if you've seen pictures of us next to each other. But then people are like sometimes like joking, "Oh, I didn't know it was her until she made this one grimace," and I was like, "Oh yeah, and that's Opal, that's not Crystal. Crystal doesn't make that face." And it's funny because like she's an ESFJ, she's not a troll like an ENTP would be, but because they have the same cognitive functions, which we'll get into in a sec, you can see her having this kind of judgmental approach, but she's not actually bitchy. And so we need to talk about that because ESFJs, they are gritty, they are edgy, and they are funny, and we need to really right now.
Okay. So I'm gonna show you guys this slideshow if you're watching the video version, but also just want to keep in mind that I guess just the stereotypes of ESFJs being the mom or like the one that cares for you, it's not wrong. But what we're gonna do in this is try and remove that stereotype as much as possible and just give you the facts of how these people operate. Because the reality is that there's an ESFJ in every friend group. There's an ESFJ goth, there's an ESFJ emo kid, there's an ESFJ popular girl, there's an ESFJ nerd, they're everywhere. They don't look one way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. They are everywhere. They don't look one way. Like, you have to really know what to look for to spot an ESFJ millennial in the wild, because but maybe we can just unpack like all the rundowns, because I also am aware that maybe some ESFJs in the community may think they're like ENFJs, or may not even know like what they are.
Yes.
So I love to see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I would love us to open with why we chose the Optimist as our title for them, because I've kind of said this,
talk a little
and
about that.
people in the community are really like, what? They're the Optimist? What? So I want to say that like it was the ESFJs that I have met that have like kind of been able to see the bright side of life, and it's not the same as like someone who just is like they like kind of just almost ideologically or philosophically just believe in like kind of espousing the ability to make the most of what you're given in life, make the most of like persevering. They view like optimism as kind of like an action more than just I'm gonna just numb everything out or something. Like it's like they're striving like toward it, and I think that's really important to establish, because people are very surprised by this. It feels like kind of a bold claim. Like I'm not sure how you feel about it.
Yeah.
But, like I do feel like not like pushback. Like we're like ew no, but they're more like oh I didn't expect that. I'm like what did you expect?
Yeah.
Like the caretaker? Hell no, we're not going to use that. They really just are able to use their feelings and their like gauge of what's going on to continue to go forward without repressing things necessarily. So
I was unsure about using optimist at first, but I couldn't come up with a better word, and I just thought it was so true. And then whenever I asked like a few ESFJs, they were like, no, I think that's right. And I guess like the pushback is that people might say, well, anyone could be an optimist or a pessimist. That doesn't have to do with type. And I get that. And there are sad ESFJs. But what I've noticed is that if an ESFJ is upset, they beat themselves up for feeling upset as though they shouldn't feel upset. And that's why they're the optimist, is because they try to not like be upset, if that makes sense. And they have this sort of SI sense of duty to overcome that. Even if they are in like a terrible mood, they almost double down on that terrible mood by thinking that they shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly kind of an FE Dom thing too, because I see ENFJs sort of doing this, but I feel like for ESFJs, they're very like in touch with their immediate surroundings. They can't ignore that like a bad mood can be like a sour smell in the room. Like they are like hypersensitive to all the micro ways that their bad mood can infect like others. I did have like a close ESFJ friend in college that Meghan knows, and one of my life coaches was also an ESFJ, and they're just really good at like kind of helping people, not just themselves but also other people, see the bright side of things, because what they do is they break down situations and their components and predicaments, and they find the silver lining in all of them.
Yes.
Because the thing about the phrase a silver lining is it's a lining. It's not like, oh, a silver freaking chunk. It's like a lining. It's like, let's find that piece that still pertains. And I don't think ENFJs do this as much, because they don't like break things down into bits of like, oh, well, this part is still salvageable of like what could be a good mood.
Well, so, ENFJs, I think, are a little bit more cynical because they kind of feel a little bit more like they don't belong. And so they could just be a little bit more jaded quicker. But even like, for example, ESFJs can be very matter of fact about their optimism. My mom, for example, she's been working from home due to the coronavirus. She is probably an Enneagram 6. She's very kind of paranoid about sicknesses and like wants to make sure I'm safe and everything like that. And she is definitely missing like spending time with friends and doing things. And she definitely has a lot of energy and would like to be not at home all the time. But she doesn't dwell on that. She just thinks, well, I mean, there's nothing I could do to change it. It's the right thing to do, sort of thing. Like, I guess it's like if an ESFJ is in a situation that is less than ideal, they don't really complain and they don't dwell in their emotions. They still are like looking at,
That's very true. I feel like it's very hard for, like, I feel like ESFJs don't necessarily like bog you down. It takes them even longer to open up about their vulnerabilities than I think ENFJs. If I recall, just the people I've known, my sister can be very closed off, like, in her own way, which is interesting because, yeah, like I've always felt like a wallop, and when I paid more attention, I realized, wait, all the ESFJs I know have that, but they're too busy being optimistic and helping others to like for you to notice unless you know what to look for. So yeah.
I think that they are very accepting of reality. And I mean, especially compared to ENFJ, they don't have extroverted sensing. So they aren't like, let's see what I could do to change this thing the way that ENFJs sometimes think. It's my responsibility to change the world or how things are. I feel like ESFJs can sort of just look at you with a blank face and be like, well, that's how it is. So, of course, this is the right thing to feel about it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we said optimistic. And obviously, at their best, they are incredibly optimistic. And they're the type of people that have faith and have hope, and they bring that to everyone that they're around. It's like they have an infectious hope and faith. But until they've cultivated that, they're going to keep their mouth shut because they don't want to bring any negativity to you. So, okay. So let's just talk about the different dichotomies now. ESFJ stands for extroversion, or the E stands for extroversion, the S stands for sensing, the F stands for feeling, and the J stands for judging. So to be an extrovert means that you are oriented toward the objective outer world over the subjective inner world. So the way that, their lead function is extroverted feeling. And so the way that is objective for the ESFJ is that as opposed to being like, I don't like this person, and so I'm going to do what I feel, ESFJs are going to say, well, that's your cousin. We have to treat them like a cousin, whether or not you like them.
That is what the outside world dictates, like cousin, blink, blink. Like, you can't ignore what is that, what is outside of like your inner, like, so.
Yeah.
So basically, so they're an extrovert and they also make ethical, like, value judgments. So they have extroverted feeling.
Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the difference between ISFJ and ESFJ, especially since you have both of those in your family? Like, for the people who are
for that question, Meg.
Maybe for the people who aren't sure which one you are, we can talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. So it's really hard because there's like a huge age difference. So my mom is an ISFJ, my sister is an ESFJ. The good news is I know ESFJ adults and ISFJ mom adult, and my sister is an ESFJ, like, she's not millennial, she's Gen Z. She's a young ESFJ, and I also know young ISFJs. Mm-hmm. So therefore, what I can kind of parse is, I feel like ISFJs, at the end of the day, they do care more about being like logical. Like, they're not going to just completely tune into someone's emotions and like look out necessarily like for other people as like their first kind of line of defense. Like they're not going to be as tuned in to that external world, which is what the
Mhm.
EI split is. So essentially they aren't using the cognitive function is extroverted feeling. They're not using that as readily. So if you're like in a bad mood, they won't maybe readily acknowledge it. And an ISFJ also uses their sensing before their feeling, and the ESFJ uses feeling before sensing. So an ISFJ is going to be more focused on what is sensible, what is readily observable.
Mhm.
They're not going to really entertain or indulge in someone's like emotion unless it's like immediately affecting what's going on now. And I think ESFJs, they even like, okay, my sister does not like coddling people or like babying them. This is like kind of her language, not mine, but I guess both of ours. She doesn't like really tending to people's emotions, but she still can't ignore them. So if someone is upset, she is way more like ready to be like, hey, like let's like talk about this, or kind of pointing it out, or like she's ready to be of service in some way. And she doesn't even think of it as, oh, I'm here to serve. She's more like, okay, well, there's a situation on our hands, Crystal. We need to acknowledge that our like cousin is like upset, or she is like kind of like, she snaps into that mode even though she doesn't identify as someone who like even enjoys giving. It's still just, she will pay attention to the external emotion. While it's funny because my mom, she'll see it but maybe kind of ignore it. And my sister and my mom actually have gotten into fights in front of me a lot because of this, where like my mom will be like kind of nagging at my dad, who's an ISFP, and my sister will be like, can't you tell he's getting annoyed? Like, what's wrong with you? Like she'll like very much like sort of like kind of know when the emotional, like what the changes are, or be paying attention to them. And my mom does not pay attention to those. She's more like, he's like littering on the ground, like, can you not, like, when my sister's like, well, that's just how he is, like, oh my god, like that. And it's like she's
Another
kind of picking that kind of thing up. And so that's like, well, okay, that was like one anecdote,
Mhm.
but I hope that kind of illustrates what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was gonna say too that I think ESFJs can be a little bit more of a shit starter if they want to, because
They're paying attention to the emotions.
they're
Yeah.
confident in what they see in the emotional realm, um, which means that sometimes they could be very confident that they're in the right and say something kind of like how you said your sister did, is, can't you tell he's annoyed, geez, or like kind of like exclaim something like that. But overall ESFJs don't really want, they tend to be like pretty conflict avoidant and can be passive aggressive more than aggressive, because they don't really want to interrupt the emotional flow unless it gets to the point where they're feeling like so extremely uncomfortable that they just need to call it out. One thing though to keep in mind though is ISFJs use FE as a tool to protect their little inner SI world, where for ESFJs, FE is their world. So
Yeah. So for an ISFJ, it's introverted sensing. For those, we'll get to these kind of terms we're using. But basically, ISFJs are paying more attention to their own homeostases, and you'll kind of see it where I don't want to say that like, well, okay, I am biased because this kind of can hurt me because my sensing is very low down. But to me, it'll be like, oh, like you're not going out of your way to acknowledge my experience at times if it's interrupting your comfort zone. And my sister is able to kind of like not need her comfort zone like validated as much to like kind of show up for the external world. So I think that, you know, if you're wondering if you're an ESFJ or ISFJ, even if like you think you're very extroverted because you identify with using your emotions to kind of pay attention to what's going around, think of what it takes for you to do that. If it takes almost no energy to just react to the emotion, versus if you kind of have to be kind of comfortable or get a sense of what your surroundings kind of are and feel like safe, then you can maybe see the difference. Because with ISFJs, their own safety does affect them, even if they're really sweet. they really can be. I
Yeah.
know some awesome ISFJs, like shout out to Jamie, you're still ISFJ,
Mhm.
but they still will have to pay attention to what's physically, like what their body's reacting to, how their experience is going. And ESFJ
Yeah.
will be looking at the objective outer world.
Yeah, I'll just say too that for ISFJs, they really care about the social fabric, but they might be afraid to add to it. They're way more likely to be shy. Now, I know introversion is more than being shy,
Mm-hmm.
and anyone can have social anxiety, but like for ISFJs, since both SFJs tend to be kind of passive aggressive and kind of conflict avoidant, when FE is a little lower down and you're just like a little bit more unsure or scared of doing something wrong in the external emotional world, then ISFJs can really hold themselves back more. However, what I am interested in is that almost every ESFJ I know, I feel like has said the phrase of like, I have no friends.
Oh my
And
gosh, this is that too.
yeah, my sister was like student body president, and like every homecoming she had invited like 10 people over to her house or to our parents' house in high school, and she still had the nerve to say, I have no friends. And what I want to say though is that for people on the outside looking in to ESFJs, you're going to see like they're so charming, they're so good with people, they know how to make everyone feel comfortable. But to the ESFJ, they're going to see all of the people that don't like them, all of the people that are choosing other people over them, and they can feel really lonely because they really just want to belong and they really want to feel comfortable. But they also feel like they often might feel like they are always chose last or like taken for granted because they don't want to ruin the peace of anybody else's time. And so whenever they are maybe feeling insecure in some way, they are not necessarily likely to bring that up.
Yeah,
Do you have
like
anything to say on that? Like perhaps an ESFJ that thinks, oh, well, I'm not the stereotype of like having all these friends and stuff.
my sister compares herself to that stereotype all the time. Like she'll be like, well, I don't feel like they really like want to listen to me when I talk though. Like she'll explain like the markers of like how she knows you can trust a friend. Like she kind of wants someone to kind of almost open her up. Like she
Mm-hmm.
is like, I feel like I'm always looking out for other people, but like when I'm having a hard time, no one's coming to me and being like, oh, like how are you? And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's my marker for how I know. She's like, I just hang out with these people, but they don't really get me. And see, it's different than like being like, I think like an INFP and having like introverted feeling, which an ESFJ does not have the extroverted feeling. They don't have enough introverted feeling to be like, oh, woe is me, I'm a victim. They're more like, I don't know. My brain doesn't agree with the idea that I have friends, but I also might see proof that I hang out with people a lot. So I think that their reality may be a little shaky because that kind of closeness and how they measure it, they might not have established in a concrete way, but they don't feel like something's hitting the spot, which is
I
what I
think,
see frequently
yes,
actually.
exactly. It's because they know how to have acquaintances pretty easily, but it can take a bit to craft them and like really get them
Yeah,
to
yeah,
open
and
up.
like like I think that when they are close to someone, they also a lot of ESFJs say, "Oh, I actually require a lot of validation." But I think that what's interesting is they don't necessarily establish exactly what that validation would look like. So sometimes they'll just be like, "I just don't feel like you talk to me enough," or like with a friend or like with a relationship, whatever it is. And it's like, well, what would it look like for me to like give you what you need? And
Honestly,
sometimes ESFJs,
a problem that they really can have is they can be so afraid of doing the wrong thing that makes people not like them that they won't actually share the unique parts to them. And that is like kind of why they actually can be overlooked, is because they might seem a little boring or normal to the outsider, but that's only because they are not wanting to share like their intense experiences or like their life. And so it can kind of be like this this problem where you guys are so aware of how all the social dynamics are, and you don't want to rock the boat, but then in doing so, then you aren't like rocking the boat enough to where people notice, and then you get the validation that you need.
Yeah. And yeah, so basically they are really oriented towards the extroverted world because they're always analyzing who they are in that extroverted world.
Yes,
Like
it's not about how many friends you have.
Yeah, it's like kind of like the identity of what constitutes a true like relationship that is fulfilling. And you know, a lot of FE-DOMs honestly go through this themselves, but ESFJs have, I don't want to say they're like literally helpless to compared to ENFJs, but I think that because they don't subscribe to the idea that I'm creating my reality, they're more like, oh, like reality is something that kind of just happens to you, with like creating a routine and just figuring out how to make the most of it. They're not like, I'm the master of my own destiny and I'm going to create my ideal friend. They're more like, how can I see how my ideal friend could exist in the friends that I already have? And they won't necessarily be like, I'm going to go and search for that by leaving my hometown and da-da-da. Like, because my sister's always like, I'm not like you. We're like, you like left Oregon and like my sister still lives in our hometown because we have a nice private school for nursing in our home. Yeah, she's also a nurse, an ESFJ, and there's a lot of ESFJ nurses somehow. But yeah, she literally was like, well, I was like, why did you pick being a nurse? Oh, she's like, oh, like I'm good with people, like, you know, taking care of them. And then I was joking like, haha, you suck at taking care of me. And she's like, you're just hard to take care of. And I'm like, I'm kidding. But I just like make fun of her sometimes like that, and I think it kind of hurts her though, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop. But anyways, so she like goes to private school in our hometown because we do live next to the city. So she, you know, as of now, lives at home. She was gonna move, actually, sadly, this month into an apartment with her friends, and right now because of, you know, COVID, it's like less safe to do that, and she won't have like the job that she was gonna get to save up for, so she's really sad. But yeah, like she's like, oh, like I don't want to like just leave the Northwest and just start over like you. Like I need comfort and I need like routine, and I'm just that kind of person. And I was like, well, but you also always complain you're lonely. And she's like, yeah, but I just need to like get over that, because I'm also like not willing to like go and find it somewhere else, because who knows how long that would take. And I'm like, well, I don't know, because I woke up and rolled out of bed and bam, found myself in like a new. She's like, yeah, but that's you. And I'm like,
that's another thing about SI is that you can get trapped in your comfort zone, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing, because like you know exactly where your comfort zone is, and so you know how to like push that a little bit. But I guess like I'll just say before we move on to the sensing part is that a lot of times, okay, all ESFJs really want to belong in some way, and until you can figure out how to like share the weird parts to you and like stand out a little bit, or maybe you just haven't found the right people or the right person, then you might still feel like that feeling of being like alone amongst a crowd. Like you might just blend in so too much because you're so afraid to rock the boat. But the thing is that all ESFJs, no matter how many friends you have, they're going to be comparing themselves to the amount, like I feel like ESFJs will be like, well, I'm not, some might say, oh, I'm not extroverted or I'm not popular. And then they compare themselves to like this ideal that is like of someone that has like 10 best friends that they hang out with all the time. And it's like, is that even real? Like, did people even do that? Or is that just like the dream for like ESFJs? You know what I mean? Like they're comparing themselves to like this ideal that almost doesn't even exist.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like they're not idealistic necessarily too, because okay, like they are, as is here, sensing. So like they do look at the physical facts, and that's the avenue with which they're understanding the world and like how they're going about it. But what they make those facts mean is like something totally different. So at the same time that they're like, oh, I don't think I have any friends, I don't feel like it haunts them to where they begin this like philosophical pursuit of what even is a friend, or no, they're not going to unpack that concept, if that makes sense, because they're not looking at the abstract facts, they're looking at the physical facts, which are, and even if I feel alone, like I have these people anyway, so it's not like this is going to ruin my life or something. Like at the same time my sister complains, it's not so constant that it's like inhibiting her ability to
It's
like
more
live her
just
life.
self-deprecating.
But like, do you agree with like what I'm saying with like
Yeah.
like it's like, yeah, like it's self-deprecating, but it's also not like they're determined to fix it and they go on this strange hero's journey and such. They're more like, they're going to say that, but at the end of the day they care more about the immediate needs they have, which are, well, at least I have like a bed and like food and a job. So it's like, even if I don't feel 100% satisfied in my friendships, is it going to kill me? Probably not.
Yeah, they know how to put things into perspective where it's like, but almost to the point where it could be like, I can't be unhappy because I have XYZ. And they like will have these boundaries on their emotions. But anyway, so they are sensors, which means that they value the physical facts over the abstract concepts. They differ from ENFJs in ways that we've already sort of described, but they're a lot more present than ENFJs. They're a lot more content with what reality is. They don't always need to be pushing to seeing potential. They aren't going to chase potential. Like they're going to go with what is reliable. A big difference between this is how like my sister even like worked a job that she didn't really like right out of college and like stayed with my parents and was like saving up even though she could have afforded to move out, because like to her, like she really wanted to be a lot more conservative with her money and like not take a risk unless she had like the physical evidence to take that risk, similar to what you were saying with your sister, where like for me, I'm a lot more focused on like my intuitive like fuel tank. And I think about how I'm drained
totally. And
by
like
certain
I feel like here's the thing that ESFJs are realistic about is they know that everything has a trade-off. So
yes.
And I feel like sometimes like if like I feel like for them, like even compared to like an ISFJ who might actually complain about this a little bit more, ESFJs just kind of know that I made my choice and this is what it is, and if I am that unhappy, I will do something about it because I can't ignore my emotional environment.
Yes.
But they really do like choose their battles. Like I think that my sister does that pretty well compared to my mom, which I don't know if that's just a person thing or also because of their personality types. But I feel like whenever I'm like, choose your battles, sis, when it comes to like the bigger things in life with like bigger life choices, she does not sit around regretting or complaining about something unless she's about to change it. It's funny because she'll sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Like she'll be like, I wish I hadn't ordered this like food or something. But with like bigger things, she'll be like, well, I chose these friends. Like, I guess like I'm just not willing to go and change up my life enough to go and like choose other friends. So with that, I think that's my favorite quality of hers, that she's like willing to like actually be okay with what she's making in a greater context. And to be honest, no shade, I feel like even ENFJs kind of struggle with that.
Yeah.
And that's something you could learn from with ESFJs, where they really do like just go, okay, well, this is what it is.
Yeah,
and,
they really do.
I will say, I like that.
Yeah, I will say too that I think it's great that you're giving examples here, because another thing in regards to ESFJs being sensors is that in order for them to latch on to an intuitive concept, they're capable of it, but it helps to give examples. So thank you for doing that, because it's something I could forget to do. Because
I really do think ESFJs are pretty good at like I just feel like okay, so maybe ESFJs who are kind of new to the typology big brain community might like not understand what we are referring to when it comes to stereotyping them as moms, because okay, so to break this down, in the type community, a lot of people who study type, who are not ESFJs, kind of have an impression of like knowing instantly their mom's probably some sort of SFJ, for better or for worse. And so a lot of people in the community tend to project then that they're just very all mom like or something. So even like the guy ESFJs are like, why? But in reality, we want to break that down and like kind of explain just how this person, like who is not a parent yet, perhaps, how they're gonna be, like, because before you have kids, or if you ever even don't have kids, whatever, like you just have like this way of being and kind of functioning with the world and what your worldview ultimately comes down to. And that's like why I'm like really determined to be like, these ESFJs I know handle life this way. We need to examine it close up. So the ESFJs that are out there who might not feel like there's content that supports how they are because they're not like freaking parents, that's really important for representation. So that's my little aside.
Yeah. I will
like,
say,
shout out
if you are a millennial, which you might not be, but if you are a millennial, Josh from Drake and Josh, the character, and maybe even the person in real life, I think is a pretty good ESFJ example.
Yeah, dude, like,
So,
like finding an ESFJ. There are so many ESFJs on like ESFJ characters on television.
also, okay, Curtis Connor on YouTube is an ESFJ.
I'm pretty sure Curtis Connor on YouTube is also an ESFJ. Like,
yeah.
and everyone's like, oh, but Curtis Connor doesn't seem like a dad. Or maybe
He kind of
does
does,
like
though. He kind of has dad humor.
It's like he has dad humor that he like kind of makes fun of, but it's still like very much like dad humor. And it's hilarious. I love him.
Even like my sister has kind of like dad humor, but ironically, like as a joke.
Yeah, my sister, who's an ESFJ, her TikToks just kind of follow the trends. She just puts her own spin on it, but it's like her creative expression at this point, which is why I stalk her relentlessly. And she's like, you never talk to me, but you always watch my TikToks, and you talk to me by sending me my own TikToks and analyzing them. And I'm like, yeah, because it's the window into your soul. I couldn't pull this shit out if I wanted to.
So, I mean, I'll just say really quick, if you are on YouTube and you know who Curtis Connor is, he starts his videos by being like, I'm going to botch this completely because I'm not that much of a fan, but it's something like, hey, how's it going? If you're new here or something. And it's like, hey, subscribers, hey, how's it going? And then
he has to think about who he's talking to.
He's like, you see what happens when you subscribe? You get an extra greeting. And that's like just so FE to me. But also he's sort of like,
he has to think about what people are thinking. It's like,
but he's also like kind of just making a joke about the fact that he is more appreciative of the subscribers than those that aren't. And so he's trying to demonstrate it by saying hello twice to them.
See, I've thought of mocking that, but then I can't get into the mindset of why someone would need to do that. Because I'm not an EFJ.
I feel like he's being tongue-in-cheek and it's a joke, but also it represents the way that FE naturally is, which is like tracking.
Dude, I feel like the non-ESFJs have no idea what you're talking about, but any person who has FE first, like an ENFJ ESFJ, is going to be like, if you know, you know. I know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
So yeah. But yeah, they're all feelers. They make ethical value judgments. And they're always assessing. And it's funny because my sister's actually kind of into personality type. I'm going to send her this episode where she's like, oh my God, you just take so long to talk. Why am I listening? But she'll be like, oh, that person seems like this type. I'm like, why do you think that? She's like, because they're judgmental. And I'm like, whoa. And she's like, that person seems, she's like really fixated on the P versus J kind of lettering. And she'll be like, oh, well, that person, like, she's not doing like, oh, like they're organized. She's more like, they're judgy. Because she'll be like, every time I do something, I feel judged. And she doesn't even mean like, oh, they're looking down at me. It's more like, I'm being watched and assessed. And it's really funny because I'm like, isn't that because you watch and assess? She's like, yeah, that's why I'm a J and you're a P. And it's like, okay, well, it's funny because she's my younger sister. So I'm just like, shouldn't I be the older one who's judgier because I know more about life? And she's like, no, it just makes you more free. And I'm like, oh no, she's being philosophical now. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess like I've also heard a lot of ESFJs refer to themselves as like over-analyzing things.
And she says that too about herself, and I'm like, are you?
And it's the inferior TI. We'll get to that. But like even like my sister messaged me later, is like she like needed to talk through something, and it was about whether or not it was okay for her to miss our second cousin's wedding in order for her to go to her boyfriend's family reunion. These are the sort of things that an ESFJ is going to overanalyze.
Constant ESFJ. What is the social faux pas? And I'm just like,
exactly.
Oh, do what you want. I'm like, do what you want. She's like, you're not listening to me, sis. It's funny.
And the thing though is that they aren't necessarily looking for you to tell them what to do, but they just want to talk it through with someone and figure out what they really think. And also they want maybe someone to say like, I'll support you no matter what or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, also, I never realized how much my sister is kind of judgy. Like, but it's like cute. It's not like, oh, that person's like, she's not like gossip, but she does assess things. Like, literally.
And they're always aware of the different emotional environments, and they always are making. Which you can kind of move on to judging if you want, which is about instinctively finding new judgments from new information.
Like she always just like kind of explains the social dynamic of what's going on by explaining how the everyday kind of works and what they do and all this stuff. And I'm like, do I need this much context? And like she'll be like, hey, but like it's cute because she always has like they're like the person that does XYZ, and like she has like a way to sum up everyone's like habits, but it's not because she's like looking down on it or anything. It's just like, oh, like that's just how they are. This is how they are. This is how they are.
Yeah, they're very good at just knowing how people are.
Yeah, like she'll be like, this person tends to behave this way. This person tends to behave that way. And I'm like, how do you know but they tend to not do? She's like, do you not do that? I'm like, no. And she's like,
yeah, so because feeling and thinking are the two different ways of judging, and ESFJs, they prefer ethical value judgments over the logical reasoning statements. And because they're J's and they're always finding these new judgments, and they're always making like these ethical value judgments on every single person they meet, like constantly. And I do this too as an ENFJ, but I feel like for ESFJs, you'd be surprised what they could surmise. Sorry, that sounded sort of weird.
They surmise.
Okay. Sorry, that just sounded weird. But you would be surprised though how much they could surmise about a person within seconds. And a lot of people might find that to be stereotyping or catty or judgmental. And you know what? It can be, but it also can be extremely accurate.
Yeah.
So.
No, okay. Oh, wait, I actually want to say something. Which, like, so, you know how I always have boy situations, Meg? What's interesting is that my sister will still be like, oh, they aren't treating very well. But she doesn't seem to slam the door on, like, what someone's just like the way I think ENFJs sometimes do. Where she'll kind of be like, oh, well, you know, like people are just on their life journeys and XYZ. She like kind of leaves room for everyone to truly have their own experience that made them why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
And so I almost sometimes she's like less judgmental of my crushes in the situations, even though I do like bore her with all the details.
Can you explain the difference of how ESFJs and ENFJs are judgy?
Like what's different things? ENFJs will be like, I don't know what they're like that. Like they'll kind of be like, I don't know, but kind of not really want to know almost, unless it's like immediately self-evident. ESFJs will almost kind of speculate. Like, well, maybe they're just like that because they have a bad home life, or maybe they're just like that because, and you know, there's like the archetype of how sometimes maybe an ESFJ can make too many excuses for people. Yeah. But I also feel like sometimes these quote excuses are actually because they're curious enough to have observed the details of how people's experiences make them like such ways, because she'll be able to dignify some of my analyzing, and she won't be like, well, but the bottom line is you shouldn't XYZ. She's not like a huge ideological like person. She's more like, well, as long as you're dealing with it in this healthy way, then do whatever you want. Like she'll kind of give her assessment of a situation without making almost what feels like to me a dismissive judgment of that person. She looks at them more as like oh, like they're on their journey, don't let it like don't take it too personally. Like whenever my mom and I fight, she's just like, why can't you just accept that mom's just like that? Like she does that with everyone. She's like, they're just like that. Like she doesn't like, it doesn't mean that she's a pushover, but she does have this keen understanding of just how someone be. Like they don't surprise her necessarily. I'd say ESFJs don't get like surprised when people are like shitty or not. They'll know like if they can handle it or not, but they won't be like, I don't understand how this happened. Like which ENFJs kind
And
of
I will
do
say,
that. And ESFJs are like, human nature.
well, I feel like
I mean?
both ENFJs and ESFJs can be good at just accepting how people are, but we notice
because of that
different
FE.
aspects. We notice different aspects, but I will say, like, sure, ESFJs can be kind of pushovers in relationships where they don't notice red flags, but at the same time, they can be so accepting. And when you are accepting of how people are different and you just understand people are different, people are they are just like that. Let me just finish. Is that
okay, sorry.
Go
ahead.
When they are that way, then people cause a lot less pain because they like aren't surprised by much.
Yeah. What I will say is like when you point out someone's flaws to an ESFJ, they'll be more like, yeah, but that's like fun. Like they'll be like, yeah, but, and it won't be like, wait, like they don't get like defensive. They don't like, they're just like, like that's just not like, they just have actually consciously but like that's not a big deal to me. But I feel like it's never like they're surprised like by pointing out of someone's flaw. Like they immediately can just like spot what you're talking about. They probably had that cross their mind, and I really appreciate that. And so ENFJs aren't necessarily surprised, but like it's just like a different energy to how pointing out someone's flaws and ENFJ maybe overlooking is just different of a reaction compared to an ESFJ. And maybe as an actual ENFJ, you can like maybe contrast the way that
so
like,
speaking of SI right now is that my computer has a low battery. It just said my Mac will go to sleep unless I plug it into a power outlet, and I don't know if it makes sense to pause the video and start where we pick up once I plug it in, or if we could finish. All right, well, I'm in a different room, and if you wanted a real life example of the difference between ENFJ and ESFJ and how I am so focused on the intuitive realm of things, is that I didn't know how to organize the fact that, I guess my computer was going to run out of battery and I didn't time it correctly. But ESFJs, as sensors and judgers, they are pretty good at timing that stuff.
Yeah, because they're always keeping track of like the flow of that. Like for example, like it's like, if an ESFJ was doing this podcast, they'd be like, do you have everything ready to go? Do I have everything ready to go?
Yep.
Is my computer
Because they don't want to let people down, and I don't want to let people down either. But they're way more focused on the ways that they might sensory.
You're like, I gotta be in the right zone, like I gotta be in the right mindset, and like maybe ESFJ would take care of all of that, but like be in a bad mood, and then the podcast like might flop if they like just aren't able to drum up the enthusiasm to do it. And that's like kind of different than how an ENFJ might be.
Do you feel like an ESFJ might be super apologetic to you for like maybe wasting your time while you just had to wait
Yeah, they would be way more apologetic, but also I just can't get over how they would never have that happen in the first place because they're afraid of that apology and like letting me down. Like, and you're like, like this is just life. Like whatever.
Yeah. I'm like, oh man, I fucked up with life again.
And you're like, I'm gonna just keep going at it till it stops.
So I know we've been on this slide a lot, but I do feel like we need to address the difference between ESFP and ESFJ regarding this judging, because do you want to speak to that first, or?
ESFP like it's like basically they use completely different functions, but they all care about the external world of feeling and sensing. But in ESFP, it's funny because ESFJs always have that ESFP friend, it seems, who's like life of the party, and they're kind of reckless, and the ESFJ is like, hey, like you're gonna like knock something over if you keep on like singing loudly or do whatever. I think the big difference is that like If an ESFJ is being really fun, they're kind of looping everyone in, versus like an ESFP, they kind of have their external be like individual to individual to individual. Like it's kind of like they're not tuned in to the overall group like environment and taking care of it. They're not like responsible for it. They're
I think
more
both
like
ESFPs and
part the party.
ESFJs. Yeah, I was gonna say both ESFPs and ESFJs can be the life of the party, but for different reasons.
Yeah, like I feel like ESFPs like start the party, but ESFJs make sure the party goes on. Like they're like, oh, like let's make sure everyone has their cup full and their spirits high, and ESFPs are like, I am the spirits. Hey, like pay attention to me and you'll feel funnier and you'll feel happier and you'll feel better.
Yeah, ESFPs like embody the joy and they like exude that energy, where ESFJs more so mitigate it to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that the events that are taking place is like allowing everyone to thrive like at the party. Mm-hmm. So they like maintain the good vibe, and ESFPs like bring a good vibe, which might not vibe with everybody. There's ESFPs are probably more likely to like have enemies or something.
Whoa, loaded statement.
I mean?
But no, I know what you mean completely. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't care because they don't exist to make people happy. Like ESFPs are like, I am me, so that's just how it is. But
that's so true. Like,
yeah. All right, so we're moving on here to the 4 Kiersey temperaments. We have the artisans that are the SPs, the idealists that are the NFs, the guardians that are the SJs, and the rationalists that are the NTs. If you want to learn more about the 4 temperaments, check out kiersey.com, which you could go to at KEIRSEY.com. ESFJs are the guardians, and the values for the guardians is reliability, service, and respectability. So this is going to flavor the way that your type comes off. So if you're maybe in between ESFP or ESFJ, take a look at the artisans that value audacity and adaptability and compare that to the SJ nature of reliability and service. That's like a huge difference there. And also, maybe if you're in between ENFJ and ESFJ, the idealist NFs are way more about authenticity and empathy. And not that anyone could be empathetic, anyone could be reliable. We say this in every episode. But you can kind of see the difference here, especially between ENFJ and ESFJ, that there's this level of reliability and respectability that makes ESFJs, in the way that they express their FE, a lot more socially harmonious. Whereas ENFJs are like, I'm going to change the world for the better. But ENFJs are often like hated while doing that. Like, let's just be real. Like Martin Luther King, we look back in time and we love the guy, but at the time, he was not necessarily loved. And Martin Luther King is a great example of an ENFJ where he uses this empathy and authenticity to shake things up and rock the boat. ESFJs, not that they can't do that, which they can, and they can like support causes and move things forward, but ESFJs are a lot less likely to look disrespectful to the group. So they like know, they like pick their battles and they're like, is this the right time at the right place? Like, they aren't like an iconoclast.
It doesn't mean that they're going to be like boring, but it means that they're going to kind of like, you know, figure out a way to like serve in the way that's like kind of meeting the physical needs of the community in some way. Like whether you're an ESJ, ISJ, like you're just going to be like reliable to be kind of like almost a constant like pillar upholding whatever physical sorts of institutions already exist. So that's why when the institution itself exists, the nature of how the guardian comes off is also going to change. Like millennial SJs, they'll be the ones to share all the funny YouTube links because our generation will care more about like viral humor, and they'll try harder to let you know when something is really funny and like when something is, they'll like kind of latch on to that. They are of service to transmute a lot of like things that we respect and we rely on. And I love that about them, to be honest, because that's kind of underrated.
They're a lot more predictable and reliable people. Like if they say they're going to do something, they probably stick to their word a little bit more than an ENFJ would. So reliability is extremely important to them. Okay, so now moving on to the Linda Behrens interaction styles. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to lindabehrens.com. Linda, Linda, and then Behrens, Behrens. Yeah, that's right. .com.
Yeah. So
sorry, I was like spaced out for a second. So we have these 4 different ways of interacting, and so as we've mentioned before, when we're talking about the cognitive functions, the cognitive functions reflect how you cognitively process. So that is a mental sort of internal process. And we can notice these 16 holistic patterns of how behavior is associated with those ways of processing. But the external behavior is not exactly lined up with your cognitive functions. But what Linda Behrens is doing with the interaction styles is notating these ways that people interact based on their type. So there are people who chart the course, people who get things going, people who are more in charge, and people who operate behind the scenes. And ESFJs are in the get things going group, along with ENFPs, ENTPs, and ESFPs. And they are driven to get an embraced result. They are initiating, informing, and process oriented. So
I feel like ESFJs just kind of initiate focusing on what needs to be done. That's like how they kind of are. And like I think it's funny that they're the only EJ of the get things going archetype. But I do resonate with like they're not like spontaneous necessarily, but they are able to adapt to what needs to be done if it needs to be done. Basically, they know how to keep the wheel rolling if they need it to. Like my sister and I can like really pitch in to help our family with whatever together in a way that's very interesting. Because again, I would never call her like an EP. However, she is able to adapt to figuring out how to initiate whatever she's trying to accomplish. And I think that that's very similar to what I do.
ESFJs can sort of step back and let someone else lead more than the other EJ types and be like, all right, well, I'll just make sure everything is getting done the way it needs to get done. But yeah, it is interesting though that a huge difference between ESFJs and ENFJs is what you can see here with the interaction styles, that ENFJs are in charge types. So they are more directive. So the way the FE comes across in an ENFJ is they're a lot more likely to tell you what to do or to have stronger opinions. As we already mentioned, ENFJs are more likely to be like iconoclasts or kind of go against the grain here. And also they have more of this like natural leadership quality that could be a little bit more intimidating, where for ESFJs, they could be a little bit more adaptable, especially in a work setting, and stick to the process, just trust the process, where ENFJs in charge are more outcome oriented, can get frustrated with the process. Anything else you want to add here?
Nope, I think I'm good.
Okay. And then we have the 4 cognitive temperaments, which is something that Crystal and I, we came up with these names here. And it's based on the way in which your cognitive functions operate and like the pattern of your functions. So we have the Pharaoh, that are the EJ types that manage people and matter. We have the magicians, that are the EP types that transmute ideas and energy. We have the prophets, which are the IJ types that direct ideas and energy. We have the goldsmith, which are the IP types that reconfigures people and matter. So ESFJs are the Pharaoh types, and they are this way because they lead with extroverted judging, which is managing in this external, they're like making judgments about the objective world of people and matter and things. And they pierce through this with their introverted perceiving. So do you want to talk a little bit about how ESFJs relate to the Pharaoh?
I think that they really know how to manage the emotions in a room. They really know how to like deeply understand people, and so they naturally end up managing it because they're more aware of it. And like that's pretty good, because again, like when my family is fighting, my sister's like, can't you see they're like that? She can see how people just are, and the best way to put them in a way that's beneficial to the whole collective. And that is really important, because people don't think of ESFJs as like super leaders, but they are. Like, oh, Marie Forleo, we think, is an ESFJ,
Yeah.
and she has led a revolution in the business world. So I think it is, and it's because of her grasp of how people work that she's been able to do that. So I think that that's super important for us to like really like point to, because I know that it's like ENFJ, ENTJ, ESG manager types are the stereotypes, but ESFJs are just as good at getting the lay of the land really fast and doing with it what they will.
Yeah. And I mean, the Pharaoh types are like likely to step up and manage a situation and be the first to volunteer for things like that. And you often see, if there's an ESFJ in your family, they probably volunteer to host like a family event, or like they might know exactly what to do or say, like, oh, do you need any food? Like things like that. And I know that again is kind of with the mom stereotype, but also like they're aware of what is needed in the situations, and they are able to step up and make sure that it happens. So their first cognitive function is FE, and we call this the autopilot function because this is the function that you use when you don't even know that you're using it. We can even take it for granted, or maybe overdo it because we just see it as this is what it means to be alive. This is reality. But so for FE is a judging function that uses objective values and ethics to make collective decisions. FE always seeks mutual benefit, but when it's placed in the autopilot slot, this function takes little to no energy to use, and it is your default state of being. We talked about this a little bit before, about how ESFJs, they might, forget to put their own mask on first. They're very driven by helping other people. They might not notice the red flags in a negative relationship because they can like kind of make excuses or like see the reasons why people do things, and like they can be very accepting. Anything else, Crystal?
No, I think we covered a lot of it earlier in like our little rundown of everything, but I'm really excited to get to like the T and the N side of them, because that's what people don't always see. So.
That's true. Okay, so yeah, people kind of know how they are with the FE, and I'll just say too that it doesn't mean that they don't have feelings. It's just that they're always putting their own personal feelings in context in the grand scheme of things, and they don't want to mope. They don't want to spread their negative vibes, and so they're gonna do what they can to. I mean, at their worst, they can kind of suppress those emotions, but yeah. Then their growth key function is Introverted Sensing, or SI. SI is a perceiving function that organizes subjective physical facts from its own personal experiences to interpret reality. SI always seeks homeostasis, but when it's placed in the growth key slot, intentionally leaning on this function will open doors to opportunity. Individuals who regularly use the growth key will make better decisions and see things more clearly. So in the case of an ESFJ, this could be like, really, it's easy to be accepting of everyone, but you have to remember like what makes you comfortable, and like you have to build your foundation and plant your roots where in a place where you feel comfortable and where you feel like you belong.
Yeah, and again, because it's the growth key function, not like their autopilot, they're not only focused on subjective physical facts and their own homeostasis and comfort zone. They instead use that to support how they're going to use that extrovert feeling to make sure everyone's homeostasis is like doing well and everything. So that's what I really like about them.
Yeah, and that is one thing that is different between them and ISFJs, is that ESFJs don't necessarily struggle to get out of their comfort zone in the same way, and in fact, they might even put their comfort zone on the back burner a little bit or like think that it's more comfortable to be catering to everyone else's emotions than actually doing what needs to be done to prioritize their physical comfort, which might be to get involved in less drama and, you know, set better boundaries with people. So that could be a point of growth for ESFJs, to lean on the SI to, you know, really just pick your battles. Like, you don't need to like raise your voice at people. Like, get people out of your life that are not like supporting your comfort and your growth.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And then we have the Gilded coin function, which is extroverted intuition, or NE. NE is a perceiving function that gathers objective abstract concepts to perceive possibilities. NE always seeks to imagine, but when it's placed in the Gilded coin slot, this use of this function tends to be overly idealized and overeager. There's something more than what meets the eye with this function, so there's a lot to lose when cashing in on this function at inopportune times. So this could look like an ESFJ like making an assumption about someone that they don't know, that isn't a fully fleshed out idea. This can be them thinking about the worst case scenario and like being paranoid in a situation. Or it also could be like creativity whenever a friend needs them, or for their job or any situation, coming up with a creative solution. What do you think?
So I feel like ESFJs are really fun. Like, their humor can be quirky. They are really perceptive to puns and weird associations, and they can just be like kind of able to be as spontaneous and creative as, you know, an NE user, like an NP might be. Like, my sister is very able to like troll people and like you make memes and like just be a riot overall. And I think that's something that people don't give them enough credit for at times.
Yeah.
It doesn't rule their life. Like, at the end of the day, they're going to choose like homeostasis. They're not going to crave difference and excitement all the time. But if they are like in the right mood, they can get in that mode. And also, I think that sometimes they can like kind of overindulge in all the possibilities that having extrovert intuition like entails. So I think that that is something to keep in mind with them. But I think overall, like, they can be quite intuitive. Because again, like with our example with like the friend thing, like, oh, maybe I don't really have like friends, or I don't feel like I do. Like, I think this is kind of the intuition that's in the third Gilded coin function slot, straining to figure out what is my reality. You know, they really are like double taking it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say too that gosh, what was I gonna say? They can really engage with NE like for fun, but they don't tend to make decisions this way. It's not serious for them. It's fun. It's
not that deep, man.
It's memes. It's humor. It's they can do all the things that NE DOMs do, which is like be funny and goofy and make puns, and like they understand metaphors and stuff. But Crystal, do you mind sharing a little bit about maybe an example from your own life of like that NPs, they actually use NE to make real decisions in their life. It's serious.
Yeah. Like,
it's not just oh, I'm goofy. Like it's like something like, you literally rely on.
It's not just like, oh, I'm in a fun mood, or I think this humor is good, or I'm going to use this to be creative. There is no switching off the creativity for me. I have to literally get creative about how I do anything in order to do anything. Like, my routine, I have to go to a different grocery store. Like, I have to like have my career keep me excited with like talking to different people, all that stuff. I like moved 6 times in 2 years because I was chasing like difference and chasing novelty. And that is not how an ESFJ would be. They would be like, I need my home base. I need something. And I could live without that for a long time. And to this day, I still am kind of weirded out by having a home base, which, you know, I'm older now, so I care about that more. My ESFJs will not care about that nearly as much as me. And they won't feel like an obligation to make everything exciting in order to like make that your stability and comfort zone. For me, difference, novelty, like spontaneity and all the possibilities and indulging it. I need that in order to like live a fulfilling life. And
yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to go to
Yeah.
introverted thinking?
And then the last function is the diamond in the rough function, introverted thinking, or TI. TI is a judging function that uses subjective logic and reasoning to make personal decisions. TI always seeks truth, but when it's placed in the diamond in the rough slot, an individual will need to invest time and energy to truly see this function's value. Once that work has been done, you've hit the jackpot, and this is your gift to the world. So
Yes.
how do you see this show up in ESFJs?
Well, I think that like my sister uses a lot of introverted thinking. She really does put a lot of value on her own opinion on how to do things. She's good with her hands. She figures it out. She critically reasons through how something must be done, especially physically. She critically reasons how to handle people, how to, I don't know, like care for them, how to make her food the way she wants it to. It's really her subjective reasons for what works for her, like how she creatively understands doing anything, like especially because she's an ESFJ and S, so she will make that the center of like how the physical world is orbited for her. So yeah,
say that
she oh, go ahead.
No, I just was going to say that for ESFJs, their inferior TI can really come out as beating themselves up. They are definitely their worst inner critic. The thing though is that whenever I say that this is like the diamond in the rough and that you need to mine, like you need to invest time and energy and sort of mine this as a skill in order for it to like hit the jackpot, is what you need to understand if you're an ESFJ is that trusting your own gut and like what you think about something and like practicing your critical thinking is going to help you. It's going to increase your discernment so that you can get in better people's situations, so that you aren't dragged down with like other people's drama, and you aren't like the doormat anymore, and you aren't like letting people that don't really care about your best interests walk all over you. And the thing is that you'll be able to help people even better if you have this discernment. And that's really what it is that you can be, when this is not integrated, you can be a little catty, a little bitchy, a little gossipy, and extremely mean to yourself. And when you're mean to yourself, you are critical of other people, and you can get really snippy if you are like grumpy. Like
Yeah,
I feel like ESFJs can get grumpy.
Like, yeah, it's like kind of like your logical conviction and like being stubborn about, I'm going to do things this way. I'm not going to see it any other way. That's just how they are. And they can be like kind of naggy sometimes because of it, because they are so desperate to try and understand other people's line of thinking, because it's hard for them to grasp how deep theirs can even go, because this is the inferior diamond of the rough function. It's not very high up for them. They're not super openly voicing criticisms about everything. They only have select opinions about select things, and that is their like wheelhouse. So like disturbing their, you know, like homeostasis will lead to a lot of introverted thinking, like questioning that can seem passive aggressive when really they're just trying to figure themselves out. So cut them a break, because they're really rewarding when you're patient with them.
Yeah, and do you think that you can give some advice just to end this of how an ESFJ can set better boundaries and
Oh gosh, I think that, well, my advice to ESFJs has been actually to like critically think and like reason through your opinions about what you do care about, because if you dig into it enough, especially if you're an older ESFJ, you'll really see where your convictions are and how you can be sometimes closed-minded about projecting them onto other people. But they are really important for foundationally how you manage other people, so don't shut it out. Just continue to pursue your truth, and also continue to let yourself be a little spontaneous about how you see possibilities without being paranoid. Don't like overthink it, but just grasp onto that whatever comes your way in life, you'll be able to figure it out because you are an ESFJ and you have this ability to make the most out of anything as an optimist. So
yeah, and I will say too that like TI is really good at noticing the incompatibilities and inconsistencies between people and things, and just know that you can always love people from afar, and that's okay, and that not everybody is like the correct match for you, and that doesn't reflect on like your ability to be loved or your ability to give love or be loved. It doesn't reflect on you if there is like an incompatibility, and having stronger TI can help you see that and take it in stride and like have it not affect your heart and still just give that love out and just like protect yourself as well. Cool.
Yay! All right, this was a very long one, but hopefully everyone could get through it because we have a lot to say about, I think, the sensors, because in this day and age, everyone who is a sensor might look very intuitive, and we want to really validate that because
like
it's not something valued often.
It's just too simple to talk about sensors as, oh, they use their 5 senses, and intuitives think beyond that, because the reality is intuitives also use their 5 senses. We're also humans that have to, eat and drink. And so of course sensors are also like having to use their creativity, like we all are. So yeah, hopefully this illuminated you and helped you understand ESFJs. And if you are an ESFJ, I hope that this helps you understand your type. As always, feel free to leave questions below in the comments. And thank you so much for listening to Synchronic Saturdays, and have a wonderful day.